Hi, everyone. I'm James Garbutt.
And I'm Denny Dumas.
And this is the Garbutt Dumas Real Estate Podcast.
COVID update, March 31st, 2020. It is 7:36 a.m. A lot has changed in the last couple weeks since we did our last update. So here we go. Let's chat quickly about what we are seeing right now in the real estate industry, Jamie. And you made some predictions it was 2 weeks ago now. Let's just kind of recap or kind of go into what has changed, what the real estate industry looks like right now. First of all, no open houses. They're gone. Gone. It's kind of almost a frowned upon term these days now. Mm-hmm. If someone says open house, people cringe. But private showings are still happening. The way that they're being conducted has absolutely adjusted. A lot of agents now are pre-screening buyers. So, for us, there hasn't been a ton of changes in terms of how we market properties. We were already doing, the photos, floor plan, professional video for each property. And so now we're just kind of sharing that stuff with any buyers that are interested in listings, asking them to review it before setting up a showing. And then any private showings are now one-on-one. We're taking as much precaution as we can in terms of hand sanitizer and cleaning wipes and asking buyers not to touch anything. Us realtors are the only ones that are opening doors and turning on lights and cupboards and all that kind of stuff. It absolutely is a challenge. For the first couple of weeks, it was extremely awkward in a lot of cases where people are walking to the door thinking that they should shake your hand, pulling their hand back, not really knowing what to do, offering their elbow, kicking your feet. It's strange times right now for sure. And it seems like after 2 weeks, people are starting to get used to the new norm, and it's less awkward each interaction, but people are still trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, I think you should highlight there, though, even though showings are still happening, I imagine the amount of listings, amount of buyers is significantly reduced, right? So it's it's not normal levels. It's just the people that are, I guess, less fearful at this moment and very motivated to move in some way. Those are the ones that are looking around.
And even like there is a lot of, just to kind of put this into context for buyers out there, there is a lot of pre-work that goes into even setting up a showing. And a lot of agents are, if I have a buyer that is very anxious, needs to move, set up a showing, the listing agent is calling me and asking a bunch of questions saying, what is their employment like? Have they, been laid off? Are they going to have trouble finding a mortgage? Have they been out of the country in the last couple of weeks? Et cetera, et cetera. So there is a lot of pre-qualification for showings, whereas before it was really just like any showing for any listing. Yep, absolutely. Let's make it happen. Let's get as many people in that house as possible, try to get multiple offers. Whereas now it's more like, let's pre-screen. Let's limit showings as best we can to the people who have a legitimate shot of potentially purchasing this.
It's kind of nice having a little more pre-prep to a showing, isn't it? Like in terms of just the buyer spending a little more time, one, the agent qualifying a little bit more in advance, but also more time looking at floor plans and photos and videos, as opposed to just booking the showing up and saying, you know what, don't like it, busy street, exactly. Or whatever the instant negative feature is that they rule it off immediately.
Totally.
Yeah. And we were actually coming off, a couple 2 weeks that are arguably been pretty busy weeks. Granted, these were from the early days of COVID, and the 2 weeks ahead of us might be significantly slower. So, and we should probably mention that we're doing this podcast. What is it? March 31st today?
Yeah.
Is it the 30th? The 31st. It's the 31st. So, 31st. So we should probably timestamp this because whatever we talk about today might be irrelevant a week from now. Anyway, Denny, so practices have changed. Showings are still happening, but the volume is significantly down, and the way they're happening is a lot more, I guess, time-consuming, safe, secure, tricky. Totally. positives and negatives to the process, I imagine.
Yeah, even just like the activity flow. A couple weeks ago, it was really unknown, and we were really just guessing of what we thought the next few weeks, months would be like. And so, to kind of recap the last couple weeks, it's still very active. The amount of showings on new listings is definitely down, but the active buyers are still rating offers. We have, well, our team specifically has a ton of accepted offers in the last 2 weeks. And it doesn't really seem like price points have gone down. Condos are still really busy. Condo prices seem like they are right in line with where they were a month ago for us, anyway, in our neighborhoods that we work. We've noticed a little bit more of a slowdown on that single family home. We've had a couple listings in the last few weeks that probably should have got more attention than they are getting right now. And one of them with an accepted offer should be higher than, or it would have been higher 3 or 4 weeks ago than it is right now. So it's like, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows how long this isolation period is going to last? But as of right now, for the last couple of weeks, even after a bunch of Trudeau's announcements, after all this social distancing stuff was recommended, um, it's still like very, very active, which is a bit of a surprise to me. This
Well,
I didn't predict this level of activity 2 weeks ago based on how I thought the public was going to respond.
you know, I, I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that we're coming off a very slow year,
For
and
sure.
there's for friends of mine and people that I know that are very analytical, very, financially, economically, like, trying to justify that the market's going to crash and everything's, unemployment and everything's going into a recession. The forces against that are there's a lot of people not living in a home that they wanted that they're not living in the home they want to live in. They
Mhm.
haven't upgraded. They haven't bought the first place. And I mentioned this in the last podcast on the topic. And so there's these other forces that are coming in just from the fact that we're coming off a very statistically slow year. So it felt
Mhm.
like prior to this, we were having momentum of like maybe a 10% lift this year. So we were
Yeah.
trending upwards. So whatever this whole COVID thing causes, I'm really taking into account that we were upward trending and well, a number of things. Like, when do we roll into my predictions, Denny? Should we
Go
roll
for
right
it.
into them? Like, let's
Go for
recap
it.
on them because 2 weeks ago we did this, and I kind of felt stock market. Well, I felt our market was upward trending, and it would take a lot for it to knock it the other direction. And I was speaking specifically for the products that we sell, like the $1.2 million house or the $600,000 two-bedroom suburb condo. Those are just examples. Now, I do feel there is going to be slower times ahead, but there's
Mhm.
clearly a lag. There's the
Yeah.
sales that are happening through the last 2 weeks are not 20, 30% market corrected like the financial markets.
Yeah.
What would you say? They're kind of in line with the sales that were happening in January prior to this, with the exception of maybe a few investment, type of properties. But the typical homes and condos that people that live and work here want to own,
Yeah.
they're so far unaffected. Just sales volumes down. Would you agree with that?
It's yeah, like in any slower period, usually the homes that have a big negative, whether, on a busy street need, a significant renovation or there's something wrong with them, maybe layout isn't ideal or whatever it may be, like we've mentioned in other podcasts, those ones are being heard a little bit more and those ones are much slower. Whereas that like ideal location 2 bedroom condo is still pretty active, and price points, accepted offer price points that we're seeing right now are similar to January, February.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, to kind of recap on where I think before I made a statement 2 weeks ago that I felt that the typical products that I'm mentioning before, the condo, the house, 1.2, 600,000, uh, I felt that those would be around the same price point a few months from now when we get through
Yeah.
this. And right now I have no data to steer me the other direction. And I think the important
Totally.
thing is to explain why. So, let's talk about the forces or the factors here that would cause prices to go down and the factors that would hold prices at their current levels. So, an easy thing for causing prices to go down is, well, financial markets have been hit. They're oddly enough, they bottomed out between, well, in the latest curves, they bottomed out between now and our last podcast. So the last where the markets are at today is probably slightly higher than they were 2 weeks ago, but there was a bottom in between. So, but the financial markets are off. So that, granted, people have lost some money. Secondly, unemployment. A pile of layoffs. Now, I think I wonder if the government would change their approach next time, but they kind of started with the layoff announcements. A ton of business went straight to the layoff, and then they came in with the subsidy a week later,
Yeah.
or a little bit later. So too bad. Most businesses had made their decision by then, and a lot of them are backtracking, including some that I'm involved in and aware of. So we're trying to figure out, like, we're seeing these announcements come in, but there have been a lot of layoffs, and there's no question about that. And I guess the big question is, what will be the rate of return of these people coming back to the job force? So.
Right.
So when I'm kind of coming up with my prediction that things will be around the same, my thought is, well, I'm taking into account that the market has been hit. I'm taking into account that we're, from all things I've listened to from experts in the field, that we are basically highly likely to enter a recession, a global recession of some point. It's just to what extent, how much it will affect Vancouver, how long it will last. Those are the big question marks. And
Mhm.
then I'm also taking into account that unemployment's going to increase. So right now I believe we're in the 4 to 5% range. Well, prior to this, but I mean, I would imagine there's going to be 5 to 10% of the workforce laid off. And I imagine, I'm guessing, when the dust settles, as people return to unemployment, from the experts I've heard, is we may see an increase by 5% in Canadian unemployment. So what's
Hmm.
4.5% today might end up to be, like, I don't know, 9% after the dust settles. So take into account higher unemployment, take into account financial markets crashing. What else am I missing here, Denny? What else is causing prices to go down? Layoffs, unemployment, said that. Uh,
Mhm.
all that in mind, the factors that were causing prices to go upwards is, well, one, lack of supply. So
Mhm.
at the end of the day, there's still a supply and demand. And the remaining demand after the unemployment, the remaining demand after those that are affected by the stock market, still seems in line with the supply in a more balanced way. And I feel that the supply will remain a bit tighter. Now, if the supply loosens up and everyone sells out of fear at the same time, it's going to change everything. But I just don't see that happening. Um, uh, and another reason for it, Denny, is debt levels. I have the analytical types that look at, well, Canada's at all-time debt levels when you compare debt to income. But when you compare debt to asset ratio, it's actually down. So people actually have, even though they're taking on more debt for their income, they actually have more equity.
Yeah.
So, if you're putting yourself in the shoes of the typical homeowner that has more equity than they did before, what's going to motivate you to sell at the worst possible time and fear? Most people are going to ride it out. There's going to be a few exceptions, but most people will ride out the bad times, right? They'll just not sell in a time of uncertainty. So when I look at the supply and demand, when you take in the job loss, the market crash, the high debt ratios, but you counter that with a lack of supply, you counter that with upward market momentum that was happening, you counter that with, like, a weaker Canadian dollar, and at any point in time, we could have another wave of foreign investors come to Vancouver. Um, and you're coming off of one of the slowest years that we've had in my career. I just think the forces kind of pushing against each other, and all the lower interest rates and the looser lending. Um, there's forces on both sides. So that's kind
Yeah.
of where I'm thinking that the forces that causes prices to go down, and the forces against that, I see that balancing out over the coming months. And if anything, if there is some sort of price decrease, I think it's going to lag, maybe to the fall, maybe it's next year, but it's going to lag when the supply loosens and the job loss is causing a serious impact on the economy. And that's an if the supply loosens, if the job loss
Mhm.
causes problems in Vancouver. Anyway, that was a long rant, Denny. That was a long
Yeah,
one.
no, that's okay. The one thing I will mention is, even though the last couple of weeks, like for our business specifically with active clients, has been quite steady for this time of year, like pretty typical for March, early April kind of thing. The amount of new lead flow for us has been down quite a bit. So that's where I feel the next, if this lasts longer than another 30 days kind of thing, I could see a big decrease in activity, just because it seems like new clients, new buyers and sellers who are potentially thinking about buying or selling this spring are kind of putting it on the sidelines during this health concern.
So being on the forefront, you're seeing the latest trend from our team that we're just not getting the leads, the
It's
seller
not the
request.
same exactly
Yeah.
that we typically see early spring.
So you're saying your push for FaceTime evaluations isn't working?
Hey, I'm still out there. I'm ready.
You know what though? I mean, that to me tells us that there's not, the supply is not going to loosen up anytime soon, right? So
Exactly.
what could potentially happen is supply remains tight for the coming months, which keeps prices up. Um, you know, a natural time when the market transitions is July and August. So
Mhm.
if it shows its colors, it might, supply might loosen up in the fall and more than demand. And that if I look back at the 2008 2009 crash, that's when in 2008 September was the tipping point. Um, but that was a completely different crash. That was a completely different scenario. That was
Yeah.
caused by credit crunch, housing crisis, liquidity. It was a financial industry crash, whereas this is a pandemic. It's
Yeah.
so can't apples and oranges anyway.
Mm. Good news is, I was at the grocery store a couple days ago, and there is meat in the meat section again. So it seems like people are not freaking out as much as they were a couple weeks ago.
No,
Toilet paper's still gone. No toilet paper. Good luck trying to find it. But it seems like everything else is kind of slowed down, at least in terms of saving materials for this apocalypse that some people think we're heading towards.
Yeah, I think it's clear. Like March 31st, still weird times, still
Yeah.
early days. We don't know if we're gonna have a month, 2 months, 6 months of this ahead of us. But at some point when I imagine when they announce that restaurants can open, or if they do announce the school system back in before the school year's over, one of those triggering points that makes allows people to congregate. If that gets announced, I don't know, call it May, June, July. I think that's the moment where we're going to get those flood of calls, and
Totally.
that's when this real estate season's going to step into effect.
Totally.
There's just too many buyers that want to buy.
How so moving from like update to how do we, as business owners, how do we take advantage of slower periods, regardless of whether it's during coronavirus like it is right now, or just slower markets in general like 2019? What are some things that we are doing to take advantage of those to come out better on the other side?
Well, I think we should let our listeners know kind of our partnership dynamic where
Mhm.
I spend a little more of my time working on the business and you spend a little more of your time on the sales management side and on the sales front, right?
Yeah.
So I guess from my side of working on the business, I mean, this has been great because there's some projects that are getting more progress that would be completely ignored if the market was busy.
Mhm.
But some of the biggest things that are getting done right now that might not have been getting done in a busier market is, well, one, marketing materials, branding. We're doing a listing presentation. We're making progress on a new website that we've been trying to launch for a year now. I mean, our website's loaded with content, so it's a bit of a slow mover. But I feel like these are the light is almost at the end of we're almost at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
So those are two big lagging things. I've been talking about listing presentation for years, and and it's never been finished. So listing presentation, website. I think it's a great time to create content. So when I'm thinking of content, I'm thinking evergreen content that's going to be relevant for years to come. Content that buyers and sellers would value, frequently asked questions, content that makes social media more enticing and build your following in social media, content that helps SEO for your website, content for
Mhm.
future ads. There's so much content you can create in a downtime that you can use when times are busier. So that, that content, website, and then the other thing that I've been very, very happy with that we're getting close to the end of is just the systems that our team is using. And
Mhm.
so, and this I'm talking from a real estate perspective, but at the end of the day, I'm talking about content, marketing, and systems. And I think that applies to most businesses.
For sure.
So the systems that our team is using in terms of the CRM, contact or customer relationship management system, I mean, we bounced between a few of those over the past few years, and we finally have it a simplified version that is customized to our team in the works, and that's basically a combo of Google Contacts and Airtable communicating together through a workflow automation specialist. So, I never would have found this stuff if I didn't have the downtime to do the research. So, we're going to be coming out of this, pandemic with a new website, a better system of contact management, more content to promote during this time and down the road. And I think our business is just going to be stronger after this. I mean, all these are once they're done, we can just ignore it next year and focus purely on sales. But anyway, that's my side,
we're gonna
Denny.
be so much more efficient. Like I think that's an important thing is working on the things that we aren't necessarily good at. And we've known for a few years that we're not good at these things. We just haven't had the time to spend because it's been so busy in Greater Vancouver 2016, 17, 18. So we just haven't really had the time to
No,
evolve
well,
that kind of stuff for us. So
I
this is absolutely like a time that we're trying to take advantage of, even though it's slower for sales and revenue.
like we've been partners since what was it 2014?
Yes.
So we've been
Yeah.
partners since 2014. President's Club since then. I've been President's Club since 2011, licensed since 2008, and never had a listing presentation. So it is time, Denny. It is time. Well overdue. And then all this stuff is having a hub. When you have a team, having a hub for all your contacts. Having there's so many moving parts. I'm treating a real estate team like a business is a big transition that we've made in the last couple of years, and we're almost done. We're almost done, but I guess it's never completely done. Outside of that, I didn't mention this, but it's a great time to go through your database and connect with like update them, categorize them, organize them, go through that database. Get database marketing is key.
On that note, I think it's important to even just mention our last email campaign. So
Yeah.
we did a podcast a couple weeks ago. How often do we send out emails to our database, Jamie?
We are about, let's call it 10 months of the year, almost monthly,
Yeah.
but we skip a few months.
Okay. So this one was really, COVID update, how real estate market is adjusting, our predictions for the future, and we included a link to our YouTube from the podcast from a couple weeks ago. And do you want to just share the difference in open rates compared to our normal one?
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot, and I'm opening it up as we speak, so I'm going to see the
Well,
latest.
I
But
think you messaged me the next day,
yeah,
the next day or 2 days later,
I
and
have it here.
you said it was 52.7 or something like that open rate.
So, I mean, just to kind of fill the audience in, email campaigns is through MailChimp is what we use. It's our way of trying to keep in touch with our database, and we don't. I mean, we create all the content that goes in that campaign, and so one of the biggest things that we've done recently is, well, we started this podcast, and we've really been promoting and launching the podcast and putting our content out there over the past 2 months. And this content has come in at the perfect time where people are stuck at home, and it's more video content around topics that I think more people are interested in. So part of the reason for this podcast is to create some content that lives in our email campaign that of interest our database. And our typical open rate when we have nothing really to share is around mid 30s%. So call it 36%, 35%. A good campaign might be 42% to 45% open rate. So that means, that's the percentage of people opening them. But our last campaign with better, visual content, videos, COVID-19 in the title was 58.7%. So, and this is going out to like 1,600 people. So having an open rate that's nearly 60% going out to that many people, I mean, that's as good as it's ever been. It justifies doing it. And it's only going to grow from here.
Yeah. And that YouTube video, Carl, you might have the stats, but that YouTube video probably did 10 times better in terms of views than a typical one, right?
It's way above anything, for sure.
Way above. Yeah.
So down markets, COVID markets, content, find your mediums, prep the content for them, work on your website. It's your online resume, work on your systems and your database, because that's how you treat, you keep in touch with your database, keep the relationships going. All these things need attention, and now's the perfect time to do it.
A lot of people are saying that, Jamie, but let's be a little bit more specific in terms of contact your database, reach out to past clients, but like how and what are you communicating when you're doing that? So for me, like, this is not a time for me that I'm trying to solicit business. I'm not saying, hey, if your friend or relative is looking to buy or sell, to give them my phone number. I think it just kind of would put a sour taste in people's mouth, but I'm just using it more as a slow period where I can reach out and have a genuine conversation with them. How are you enjoying that neighborhood? You've been there for 2 years now. How are your neighbors? Does your dog love that park down the street? Like some actual genuine connection points rather than like using it as a soliciting period.
Yeah, even just, sending a note saying, hope you're staying, home and
Totally.
isolated and safe and healthy, and hope your family's doing well, just some sort of I'm thinking of you note. But,
Yeah.
let's be realistic. There's people that have no problem calling everyone on the database and doing the exact same thing. And there's people that are very uncomfortable with it. So
Yeah.
if you are one of those that is uncomfortable with it, recognize go through your database, look at who's in the phone call list, look at who's in the text message list, look at who's on just maybe the Instagram or social media engagement list. We're talking about picking up the phone, but in theory, just sending a direct message or liking someone's photo, commenting on your database's, past client's photo, little things like that go a long way as well. So
even in a situation like this where there's so many changes over the last couple of weeks, what I am kind of enjoying, because it keeps me motivated to wake up and learn exactly what has changed that night when I went to bed, is just trying to be the industry leader of of sharing all those changes with our database, with our group. So like I found a lot of value in just prepping those little videos for social media, whether it be interest rate drops or mortgage deferral options or whatever it may be, small business loans, or different deferral programs that are out there or are being announced. So just trying to be like, people always have this question of like, well, what kind of content should I be putting out there? Put stuff out that is as specific to your business. And if there's a ton of changes in, regardless of industry, there's changes across the board, but use all those changes as an opportunity to educate your database. And when you're reaching out to people, when you're asking them, or when you're connecting with past clients, their situation. Maybe some of those changes apply to them more specifically than other people. So maybe just mentioning that, hey, have you heard about this specific thing? They have an investment property. So maybe talking to them about the new tenancy rules that have just been announced, those kind of things.
I think you're making a real good point, and I think let's highlight the positives and the different things you can create there. So if you're doing content, say you had the choice here, you're isolated, you're at home, you're stuck. What kind of content do you create? If you're doing what Denny's mentioning here, where you're going to be on top of all the news and share the latest with your audience, I think that's phenomenal. But that puts the pressure on you to be on top of all the news, which is great. You have nothing else to do. Great time to do it. What happens from that is you become an authority. And I think I've seen this from you, Denny, is you become an authority because people get used to seeing that, oh, you're releasing the latest news, you're doing the filtering, you're paying attention. All I have to do is pay attention to you, and I know that it's going to be coming. And Alex, who we're going to be bringing on the next podcast, he's been that guy for me. So in the finance and mortgage lending world. And so once you're that individual that's on top of the latest news, filters it through and puts it out there, there's this circle of professionals that don't want to be don't want to spend the time being on top of it. And out of ease, they just recognize, oh, you're going to do it all for me. Let's just wait to see what you come up with and copy that, or learn from you. So
100%.
the advantage of that is you come out of like a pandemic like this with authority. You become more of an authority figure. It helps build your audience. It helps, whether it's get referrals or just gain trust. The other option is to create content that's just evergreen and be out of the news. So if you just don't want to watch the headlines, you don't want to pay attention to it, you are missing an opportunity there. But if it's purely just because you want to focus on long-term only, You want to create videos that are going to live in templates for buyers at stage X of the buying process, or you want to create FAQ videos that just answer commonly asked questions, or just videos about yourself so people get, that might be used for marketing, just to be your kind of online resume. This is who I am. Those make sense too. I mean, those are longer term thoughts. So there's different strategies between the two, but I love what you're doing.
Well, thank you.
I love what you're doing, Denny. Anyway.
How can I be your authority, Jamie? I've had a bunch of other realtors reaching out to me saying, well, how is this going to change? How is this going to change sale prices in Surrey, BC?
How many times have I called, whenever I do a deal, I phone you, just say, hey, am I doing it till today's standard? So no, you are my authority. I double check everything with you, but I'm more talking about from the lending side.
Totally.
There's been a lot of change in our industry, so I've relied on Denny heavily to be on top of that change.
A lot. Every year there's new documents. So if you buy or sell a house in 5 years from now, there's going to be 173 different things you got to sign.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had the real estate board send out the COVID-19 clauses that we should be putting into our contracts. So that's the latest edition anyway. Yeah. Well, Denny, I think we've, 2-week progress report. My predictions are basically the same, but I look forward to seeing how I feel a month from now.
Totally.
So hopefully we can do another update on this down the road.
Totally. And stay tuned. Next podcast is going to be with our good friend, residential mortgage broker Alex McFadden, updating us on all the financial changes that have happened in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, let's roll into that, man. So totally. We'll wrap up this one.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thank you.